connections much more collaborative and one-to-one. This movement of collaborative consumption is creating truly authentic travel experiences that are creating economic benefits to the travelers, to the hosts, and to the providers. Our three panelists tonight are leaders in new companies that are connecting people to accommodations, dining, and transportation. The George Washington University is also about fostering connections between people to learning and to opportunities. And many of us here are students or graduates from the Tourism and Hospitality Management program, and we can attest to the lifelong connections that we've made to each other, to our chosen fields, and to the university and to the teachers that have guided us here. We'd like to honor two of these teachers tonight and to thank them for the difference they have made in our lives and to the department. So thank you to Dr. Suyong Hu and to Dr. Freckling for all of the contributions you've made to the university and to our program. And I'd like to introduce Kristen Lemro from the International Institute of Tourism Studies to say a few words on our behalf.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone. It's so great to see everyone here. This is one of my favorite events. We do, as Lisa said, 2 colloquiums a year, and the one in the fall is driven by our students, and the one in the spring is driven by our alumni, and we can't be more grateful as an institute and as a program to have such varied levels of engagement. So I want to take a second and thank you all. But the real reason I'm up on this stage right now is to recognize a colleague and friend. Dr. Freckling, Douglas Freckling, is leaving us this year. Dr. Freckling has decided to retire, although I gave him 6 months before he's back here. But Dr. Freckling has retired, and he has been honored this year, just 2 weeks ago, by being awarded the status of Professor Emeritus here at the George Washington University, which is not an honor that everyone receives. It's given to those that have really contributed to the scholarly backbone that is the university and their own fields during the time that they were here. Dr. Freckling came here 25 years ago, so he not only celebrated his 25th anniversary, he also decided to retire to keep it all nice and even. He gave us easy numbers to remember. So Dr. Freckling came here 25 years ago. He started at George Washington University just a year after we started the International Institute of Tourism Studies. He came to us with a very broad, already having a very broad background in tourism and hospitality. He came to us directly from the organization that is now the U.S. Travel Association. I know we have some USTA folks in the audience. And he was the director of the U.S. Travel Data Center, which is unfortunately no longer in existence, but a very important research arm of the USTA at that time. Dr. Freckling came into the George Washington University already recognized as a leading economist in the field of tourism, and he continues to be recognized as one of the leading economists in tourism research around the world. His advice is continually sought after in the area of economics, tourism economics, tourism satellite accounts, survey research, and other related areas. I decided when I was preparing to recognize Dr. Freckling and present the award that I'm going to present, to ask some students what their best memories were of Dr. Freckling. And so, without going into a lot of detail, so I will say that everyone used the word very difficult class. But without going into individual comments, I will give you a synopsis. I heard continually comments to the degree of one of the most dedicated professors that the university has, one that was sincerely interested in making us learn, even if it wasn't thoroughly appreciated at the moment he was making you learn, and one that the comment, I continue to use his teaching in my everyday jobs, are comments that I heard continually with the students that I talked to. I know those of you who graduated the program will agree with me that Dr. Freckling, and particularly his research class and his development and now economics class, are some of the more difficult, or probably some of the more important classes that you took in your master's program. And those of you that have been around a little bit longer remember tourism marketing as well, which is one of his pillar courses when I first. So we wanted to recognize his service to the university, but we also wanted to send him off with a little recognition. Every year, when appropriate, when we feel that there is an individual that merits the award, we present, amongst the faculty we discuss, and we present an award for meritorious service in the travel industry. This year, it was, of course, a no-brainer that we wanted to present Doug with this award. Doug, as I said, has served not only the students, but the faculty. He's been a colleague and a friend, and an advocate for what is right and ethical in the School of Business, and someone that we sincerely appreciate. So we would like to ask Dr. Franklin to come up here, and I would like to, on behalf of myself, my colleagues with GW Tourism Alumni, and the students, recognize Dr. Franklin and present this award, the Meritorious Service Award presented to Douglas C. Franklin in recognition of his outstanding contributions as a leader in tourism education and research, and for over 25 years of service to the students, alumni, and faculty of the Tourism Administration program at the George Washington University.
Challenging and thought and causing me to reinvestigate what I thought I knew and to try to prove to you that it was true and to make it clear to you as much as I could what I knew about survey research and the other fields that I taught. Now, I've been here 25 years full time. I go back with Dr. Hawkins 40 years, 42 years ago when I joined the U.S. Travel Data Center and began my career in tourism. A long time. And it wasn't hard being the leading tourism economist because I was the only tourism economist. But I can't say that anymore. And I just want to say to you that we were told to pursue our passions in our careers. There's an interesting article in today's Wall Street Journal about that, saying pursue your passions, but have a plan B. Because those passions don't always work out. Sometimes what you think you're passionate for turns out to be a really dull job. I never thought I would be standing up here in the university retiring from a full-time academic position when I started my career 40 years ago. So I commend all of you. Be open to possibilities, and you can't fail. Thank you very much.
civics at Airbnb. She's the one that designed and currently manages the shared city program. So she will tell us a little bit more about that. Danny Harris, he's the co-founder of Feastly, and David Barlow serves on the public policy team at Uber. In the next hour or so, we will discuss the sharing economy trend and how it unfolds in the world of travel. The company that defines this trend, Airbnb, is now as large as some of the major international hotel chains. It reports about 600,000 listings in 192 countries. Its valuation is reported to be about $10 billion, a number that many hotel companies could envy. And Airbnb is not alone. There are many other peer-to-peer platforms that allow us to rent accommodations to each other. We do Roomorama, HomeAway, VRBO, just to name a few. And the dining experience is also being reshaped by companies like Feastly, Eatway, Switcher Surfing, and many others. And ride sharing is another recent movement that has changed the way we get from point A to point B. And Uber is the leading company in that marketplace, followed by Lyft and Sidecar. There's also Vayable, Get Your Guide, and En-Road. Those are platforms that allow us to connect with the local and experience the destination from the eyes of the inside. It is clear that by now the sharing economy is present in every aspect of the travel industry. So the question is, what does this mean for the future of travel? Will it impact the industry? Will it reshape it? And if yes, how? What are some of the controversies and issues surrounding it? What are some of the impacts? And those are some of the questions that we will try to answer tonight. But before I turn it to the panelists to introduce their companies, I would like to get a quick poll of the audience about, just want to check how many of you have actually used the services of Airbnb, Uber, or Feastly? Quite a few. Now, how about just Airbnb? Who has traveled on Airbnb? Okay. Just Uber? No. Okay. And Feastly? Oh my God. Well, maybe there will be more after tonight's event. Well, thank you very much. And I would like to now ask the panelists to say a few words about their companies, what they do and how they do it, and maybe we can start with Molly.
Hi everyone. So I don't know how much background I need to give you all on Airbnb. When I started almost 3 years ago, nobody knew who it was, and now it seems like a lot of people know who it is, which is fantastic. Basically, Airbnb is a community marketplace for people to share the extra space in their homes with visitors from all over the world. It was founded in 2008, and since then we've grown. We're in 192 countries, 35,000 cities all over the world. And on any given night, I think we have about 100,000 people staying on Airbnb. Pretty incredible company to work for. We have more rooms than some of the major hotel chains, but our occupancy rates are much lower. And we don't own any of the rooms. So it makes for a really interesting marketplace. I'm happy to talk about the details of that when we get to the question and answer period.
David, would you like to tell us a bit about the world of ride sharing?
Ride sharing, yes. First of all, thank you for having me, and thanks for all coming tonight. I work in the public policy office at Uber. It's a team of about 15 people stationed all over the world. And Uber itself is a technology company. Like Molly said, we don't own any cars, we don't employ any drivers. We simply contract out we partner with professional drivers in some cases, and in terms of tonight's session, ride sharing, it's just your everyday resident of the city who is using their own personal vehicle to offer rides to those that are willing to make the request. We're a relatively new company. We started in 2009. Our CEO was a techie in Silicon Valley, and it started as a small tech startup, and now, as of today, we just launched into our 100th city around the world. We just launched in Beijing today. And so it's hard to believe, over the course of 4 years and millions of rides later, we're now at the point where we're offering our service in 100 cities around the world. But yeah, I'd like to answer any questions later, but hopefully it sounds like you all are somewhat familiar with the service. I expect you all are VIP users in whatever city you reside in.
I'm not a VIP user.
I'll check on that. I'll get back to you. Anyway.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can introduce us.
Sure. So it's a pleasure to meet everybody. Before I introduce what I do, I just want you to humor me for a moment. And if everybody could just close your eyes for a second. And what I want to ask you, because all of you travel and you spend your time thinking about traveling, is I want you to think about the most memorable eating experience you've had while you've been traveling. Who was with you? What did you eat? What did it smell like? What were the sounds? You can open your eyes now. I would imagine for many of you that that experience probably didn't happen at a restaurant. My co-founder was in Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, and in Lake Atitlan, he couldn't find Guatemalan food. It's true. He was walking around, he could get pizza and pasta, but he couldn't get local food. So he found a local avocado seller, and he convinced him to let him and Noah and his girlfriend to go and have dinner at his house. And that's how Beasley was formed, under this belief that the best, most authentic eating experiences we have are with other people around tables, and ideally at home. We remember them from things like holidays and other events with families. That was how the idea started. Noah and I went together to Startup Weekend in DC, November of 2011. Over 54 hours, we had an idea, we built a company. A month later, my mom, as a loving Libyan Jewish mother does, she travels down from New York to host our first meal for 25 people in DC, and the platform grew. So now we fast forward to today. Beasley, we have a presence in 3 cities, New York, DC, San Francisco. We offer meals now anywhere across the country, so we now have meals in upwards of 50 cities with representation of Beasley staff in 3 cities. We have tens of thousands of users, thousands of chefs, and we've posted hundreds of meals so far. In essence, the concept is this: we believe that there's obviously, as our partners do, that there's an excess of supply. In this case, when you look at the numbers as it relates to people who love cooking, have cooking talent, or have a desire to eventually be a chef, these numbers are tremendous, and we can talk about them shortly. Right now, the barriers to entry for them into the food space are too high. With BC, we're lowering those barriers so that any of these people can offer a food-based experience in their home. And on the other side, what we recognize is that, in essence, the dining room table is the optimal social network. The things that happen around the table are meaningful. You develop relationships. You may meet somebody and be friends. You may meet somebody and go home. But the point is that that table provides endless possibilities. And through Feastly, on the demand side, our ability to provide that to our users has incredible implications, which we'll talk about later.
Well, thank you. Thank you for very informative introductions. Now, I want to ask you about the impact of the sharing economy that all the companies represent. Many believe that it has the potential to reshape our travel industry. What is the impact that you see of this economy and of your company in particular? How should people like us in the industry prepare for it? And what should be looking out for? Maybe we can start with Davis.
Yeah, that'd be great. So Uber really is transforming the way that we all think about urban transportation. Gone are the days where, I tried to think of an example, and I thought of a very fitting one. Let's say you were flying to DC, maybe for this colloquium, and your flight has been delayed, you're already on edge, you land late at night, and you have to wander outside of Reagan, and you're waiting in that long taxi lane for however long. That is no longer necessary with Uber. With Uber, you are now able to, the minute you land, pop open your smartphone, and with the push of a button, you can arrange for a car to be waiting for you outside of the airport to take you wherever you need to go. So really, it's just kind of making people rethink of how they get from point A to point B. Like you said, we're all about making connections. Uber is connecting riders and drivers. in a way that is both safe and reliable. And so, we as a company, we have staff that reach out to different companies. I know that within, I think it was last fall, our Seattle team actually partnered with Alaska Airlines, and they had a promotional deal to give credits out to riders that wanted to get a ride to the airport and back. So that I thought was kind of it was a big, huge hit. A hotel, the Cosmopolitan in Vegas, had a deal where they gave a free weekend ground transportation from LA to Vegas and back. So it's just offering those kind of fun promotional deals, but also changing the fact that when for the travel industry, when I travel, I don't know about you all, but I love to have a cocktail or two at our meal, or to explore the restaurants or the bars in the city that I'm visiting. So with Uber, there's no more, you don't need to fear about reaching the end point of the night and not wondering how you're going to get back to your hotel or place you're staying. If Uber is operating in the city, like I said, just opening up the app and pushing the button, you can have a ride to take you where you need to go. So it's basically just bringing people together in a city, but also allowing those that are traveling to different cities an easier way to access different parts of that city and to see places they might not have been able to go before. So.
Thank you. How about Airbnb?
Sure. Well, the reason I came to Airbnb was because I really believed it was revolutionizing the hospitality industry. People, I think, thought I was a little crazy when I went there. My parents included. Now they don't think that so much because they love Airbnb. But Airbnb is revolution. Maybe I'll use kind of the typical three categories to explain how we're revolutionizing the tourism industry. First, the environmental, which is obvious. I think for a lot of the sharing economy companies, we all have these impacts. We were founded in 2008 when there was a big design conference in San Francisco and all the hotel rooms were completely booked. And our founders, Brian and Joe, who were supposed to go to that conference, realized, gee, we could host some conference goers in our apartment because they have nowhere else to stay and make some money. That use case is still prevalent today. Airbnb has expanding inventory. It can contract and expand according to demand. So we're finding, for example, in Brazil for the World Cup, where they just simply do not have enough hotel rooms and they're bringing in cruise ships. The country has a huge push to try and get Brazilians to open their homes to visitors for the World Cup. It's a really smart way of managing demand for accommodations without necessarily having to build single-use buildings like hotels that are only used for travelers and that may not always be full. Not only are we potentially saving future sprawl, but also we're really integrating visitors into the physical fabric of the city. While I'm here, I can have a guest staying in my empty apartment in San Francisco. They can use my towels and my hand soap and my hair dryer and all of these things that I've already bought that are just sitting there totally unused. They're using all my utilities and everything. So it's much more efficient use of resources. And the tourism industry can, as I'm sure you all know, can be a huge drain on resources. And I think this is going to be really interesting as more sharing economy models proliferate to see the impact on resource consumption throughout the world. The second is social. My best travel experiences have always been in people's homes with locals. My favorite way to travel, as I'm sure all of yours, is really meeting local residents and living like a local. My very first time doing that, I lived with a family in Sicily in high school, and it completely changed my life. I'm now an Italophile for life. I know more about Italian history than I know about American history. That would have never happened had I not gotten to meet this Italian family. And imagine how many other lives that kind of experience can change, and the kind of tolerance that it might create in the world. And at the scale Airbnb is operating at, we really do have an impact, potential to impact the way people think of each other in different cultures and experience the world. And then the economic impacts, which are certainly the most tangible. To be sure, we are competitive with hotels. I don't think that means hotels are ever going to go away.
Right.
There's definitely a need for hotels. For the most part, I'd say Airbnb caters to leisure travelers, not business travelers. That might change, but and Airbnb provides a very different experience than hotels do in different neighborhoods, and accommodates travelers for different purposes. So I don't know if how the kind of impact we're going to have on hotels in the future, but I would say, you know, the economic impacts of our business model on the destinations, I think, are really, really transformative. We are taking one of the world's most powerful economic drivers and bringing it right to the doorsteps of everyday local residents. And not just them, but also their favorite coffee shop and restaurant that they're sending their guests to. And the distribution of those impacts across the city, across the diverse neighborhoods in the city and the diverse residents, we've really never seen before with almost any other kind of tourism business model. And I think that's incredibly transformative for destinations.
And when it comes to the market, could you say Airbnb creates a new market segment or takes away from the existing pie, or a little bit?
I think, you know, obviously there's some competition. You know, we're certainly competing with kind of the budget hotels in outer neighborhoods. But I would say we're definitely growing the pie. We've done a lot of studies. We just released a study yesterday on Portland. You know, all of our top markets, hotels have record high occupancy rates and record high room rates, and Airbnb has been growing exponentially. So it's very clear that we're bringing in more visitors. A lot of Airbnb visitors tell us this is not their first trip to the destination. They came back because of Airbnb, because they wanted to explore a specific neighborhood, to have a specific experience. They're staying longer, they're coming back more frequently because of it. It's hard to quantify, but to be sure, I think we're definitely inducing a lot more travel.
Well, I think it's clear, most of you from raising your hands and also from the panelists, and especially the esteemed two on my right who are working for such large companies, that we share. This is a reality, whether it's Zipcar or Airbnb or Uber or Feasly. This is not a fad. This is a reality. And when you look at the numbers, it's true. And so I can sort of briefly speak to the food side, which is if you look at movement in the food space, and even if we're going to look at what's happening in traditional brick and mortar establishments, last year the National Restaurant Association put out their latest trends, sort of what's hot in the restaurant industry. And the two main leaders were pop-up restaurants and food trucks. Pop-up restaurants and food trucks. So already within the brick and mortar establishment, there's a movement away from the typical eating experience. So clearly the next step is going to be whether it's supper clubs that you've been to or Feasly or some other iteration of it, this is where the movement will go. And so now let's talk about the numbers behind it. So if we take that same report and we look at the roughly 13 million Americans that work in the food service industry, roughly more than half of them have expressed an interest to open a restaurant. Most of them never will. Those who do, the failure rate's about 60%. Then we have 30 million self-identified foodies, 180 million Americans who watch TV Food Network. I mean, these numbers are staggering. When you look at people who identify themselves or identify in some capacity of being a food lover, food producer, food enthusiast. So now let's take that all into the marketplace. So we've worked with everybody from a lawyer by day to an ice cream mogul at night. A woman who now runs her own ice cream store that started from Feasly. We've had a woman who was on Feasly working a day job. She won Chopped. We've had people who have now been featured on the front of a number of major publications from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Post, all because Feasly provided them a marketplace. So in essence, beyond these numbers, our belief is that the next Julia Child may not be at the Culinary Institute of America. But the next great Julia Child is probably in a home, cooking somewhere for a group of people. And so our ability to empower those people and then create a marketplace around them, that's where I think is the real potential is. And then it also ties into how you can connect with that from the tourism side. So clearly, as Molly had said, you know, the ability to have these authentic experiences while you travel, the centerpiece of that can be around meals. So think of Feastly as a place where food serves to promote other experiences. We've had meals that have been done in collaboration with TED, where hosts had TED Talks that were paired with meals. So you'd watch a talk and then there would be a course that was inspired by whatever was discussed. We've had meals for Spanish speakers. We've had meals on mindful meditation. We've had carb-loading meals in advance of a running club's race the next day. So now, start to layer it around this. Think of your sub-community. Now think of the kind of things that you need. Now think of putting those in those communities where you're going to be traveling. So it's just another way to connect with locals to find your people. That's the hope and the expectation for all this going to go.
Can I add one more thing? I think the whole sharing economy is really going to transform not only the tourism industry, but several industries. I think we've figured out how to do something that we, the sharing economy, have figured out how to do something that pretty much every industry in the world is trying to figure out right now. There's huge demand for personal, authentic, customized experiences, services, and products. We've seen this with the maker movement, with the sharing economy, lots of other trends. How do you scale the production of authentic, personal, customized services and products? It's nearly impossible. Hotels are trying to do it with, creating boutique brands, and each one has its own name and unique style and local experience. That's getting there. You can't really get any more personal, authentic, and customized than staying in a local resident's home or eating at a local residence in their kitchen. And Airbnb has managed to scale this to 35,000 cities around the world in just a couple of years. We've really cracked that code, and I think not just the tourism industry, but every industry in the world is going to have to figure out how to scale the production of these kinds of experiences and products that people want in order to survive.
So the best way to go about authentic experience, creating those to crowdsourcing.
Maybe there are other ways, but that's the way we figured out.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Now, as a new trend, the sharing economy often operates in legal gray areas. And I know all of your companies are facing different legal battles. Can you comment on some of those? What issues are you facing? What are the controversies and how are you addressing them? Will you start with Airbnb?
Sure. I don't think our legal battles are foreign to anybody. Basically, people have shared their homes with visitors since the beginning of time. We did not invent that. What we invented was a platform where more people could do it more frequently, with more transparency, and more safety and trust and services than ever before. Now you don't need to start a company to do it. It doesn't need to be your full-time job to run a bed and breakfast. You don't need to build a website of your own and handle payments of your own. Airbnb can do that all for you. So you could literally just decide to rent your home for one night a year, and that would be a piece of cake on Airbnb. At this scale, with this level of transparency, this activity finally needs to be regulated. It's really kind of been under the radar for forever. I mean, our grandparents probably were familiar with lodging houses, but then again, the people who ran those lodging houses, it was usually their profession. So it needs to be regulated somehow, and it's difficult to figure out how to regulate it. Questions that emerge. Are these hotels, and should they be treated as hotels by the tax code? The hotel tax is a tax on the guest, so I guess it doesn't matter if you're a guest that stays in a hotel or an Airbnb. I would actually argue that those guests have different impacts on the city. But that aside, okay, well, if there's a hotel tax, can I, renting out my apartment 1 week a year, actually do all the paperwork and figure out, do everything that the hotel accountants do to pay the hotel tax? No. Okay, so maybe that doesn't require a change in law, but it certainly requires a change in process so regular people can be compliant with it. And by the way, they all want to be really compliant. But then also there's building codes and zoning codes and other administrative codes that regulate what people can do with property and in what parts of the city different uses are allowed. If I rent my apartment a couple weeks a year, does that convert my apartment unit into a commercial use? Should it be regulated like a hotel? Should my bedroom have to be completely renovated to have a fire door, sprinklers, everything, just because I have a guest who's staying for fewer than 30 days? It's safe enough for me to sleep in regularly, but apparently it's not safe enough for a transient guest to sleep in for less than 30 days. These are all things that we're trying to figure out. And a couple cities have figured it out. I just came from Portland this morning, where last night the Planning and Sustainability Commission just approved the very first ever home sharing policy in the United States, which says the existing bed and breakfast laws are too onerous and too antiquated for this kind of activity. We need to make them easier for regular people, so when they're renting bedrooms occasionally, they're fully compliant with the law, have a modicum of safety that we feel comfortable with, and are paying the appropriate taxes. Amsterdam, a month and a half ago, just passed the first ever home sharing policy in Europe. Again, how can we make this easy for anybody in the city to do without too many barriers to entry? It's not going to be easy. We're in 35,000 cities, and each city fancies themselves as unique and different, and oh, that won't work for us, New York included. So it's going to take a while, but I think with a couple models out there, finally this activity is going to be above board and daylighted, and there'll be very clear rules so that people understand what's okay and what's not okay, and cities will have oversight.
How about Uber? I know you are quite busy.
It's no stranger to controversy there as well. So like Molly said, we've run up in a lot of different cities and to different regulatory confrontations. To back up a little bit, so ride sharing actually, Uber was late to the game with ride sharing. It actually started in California with some competitors of ours, Lyft and Sidecar. So back in 2012, when they started operating in San Francisco, we were initially reluctant to get involved because we thought there was no way that they were going to experience some pushback from regulators and city officials. But over time, we saw that actually sharing of your own personal car to offer rides to other people was extremely popular. And the city, at that point in time, was largely not enforcing against it. And so we then, as a company, created UberX, which is our ride-sharing platform. And like I said before, it's a service where you are able to take your Prius or your fuel-efficient car, and we make sure that you pass all the background checks and insurance measures are in place. But for the most part, these people do not carry commercial insurance or a commercial license issued through the city. So we now operate that in over 30 cities across the country. But as you can imagine, we have experienced a large pushback from taxi companies. And so we go into these cities and they have laws in the books that are decades old. Taxi and taxi codes that were written long before the smartphone was even a thought. Right? It was back when it was just a thing in the Star Trek movie where you saw the smartphone. But so we push back and we say, well, we aren't operating as a taxi. We are a technology company. We're connecting the riders and the drivers, and for the large part, we've seen last fall, California was the first state to actually want to regulate companies such as Uber and Lyft and Sidecar as what they call a transportation network company, or a TNC. And so basically what this law did was codify largely what Uber and our competitors were already doing in terms of making sure these drivers have adequate insurance, they're passing all the right background checks. So we've really seen, as a result of California passing that law, DC also passed a similar law as well. So part of my job is to go into these cities and, like Molly said, everyone has their own rules, and of course we can't implement what the city 2 hours down the road did. But so it's working with those local city officials to build a new regulatory framework that encompasses ride sharing. Because we're not against we're not against regulation. We're just against regulation that isn't in the support and betterment of consumers. We're excited about ride sharing, and we're seeing it pop up all over the world, and really see that being the future of urban transportation on its face.
So clearly the short answer to these questions is that it's complicated. It's extremely complicated to very extremely complicated. But the way that we position ourselves is we built out a marketplace that allow these food-based experiences to connect between the supply and the demand side, with a recognition that food laws are local and that, again, food laws are incredibly complicated. What we've done is created our own set of standards. So we work with food lawyers and food service professionals and health inspectors to ensure that our chefs have the information that they need to make informed decisions. So that can relate to everything from our set of BC guidelines to a set of tools available to them that would allow them to get insurance if they wanted to, or to get the type of regulation that they need. So that's the starting point, but again, we look, and Molly in particular has been an incredible thought leader in this space in terms of thinking about sharing from the Airbnb side that has really positive implications throughout the network, and I'm sure Uber does as well, though I'm less familiar with you, Dave, but it's nice to finally meet you. But basically what we're seeing is movement in this space. So even if you look at something like cottage food laws, there are now, I believe, 25 states that have adopted cottage food laws which allow you to produce food in your home which you're able to sell. There are obviously limitations on what you're able to, but we do see incredible movement. A lot of it's coming from the West Coast, from California and Oregon, but you have states on the East Coast that are adopting it, and our hope is that as VC and other platforms continue to grow, that we, as Uber and Airbnb do, are going to be constantly pushing the envelopes. The regulators will eventually have to come on board, and until that point, we're doing everything we can to keep all of our chefs and our users safe and ensuring that the experiences are positive and that they go by the guidelines that we put in place.
I'd like to point out a really important distinction that most regulators and the general public don't really understand. That's fundamental. The difference between what we discussed. I was talking about Airbnb hosts for the most part. You were talking about Uber as a transportation, network company. You have to really distinguish between the providers, so the Uber drivers, the Airbnb hosts, the Feastly chefs, and the platform technology companies that are connecting them to the consumers. And both groups have different regulatory issues, and they're both interesting regulatory issues. But the real problem that regulators have is when they conflate the two and assume that the technology platforms are more like traditional agents or representatives of the providers, like a travel agent or a real estate broker or whatever it might be, or a taxi dispatcher, right? And don't understand that they are internet platforms like eBay or other internet platforms there, and have similar legal limitations and protections that other internet platforms have. They also don't understand that the providers aren't necessarily getting a whole lot of support from these platforms. Every city is different when it comes to regulations, and at Airbnb, we have no clue what the laws are in Kalamazoo, but we hope that those hosts do, right? So it's really important when talking with regulators to really draw that distinction between the two groups and the kinds of regulations that apply differently to those two groups.
Thank you for that clarification. And I just want to touch very briefly on the issue of safety. Since your companies don't own the inventory, so to speak, how do you manage that? And are incidents common? From what I understand, they're not very common. And why so?
So I'll start. What Airbnb teaches me is that people are willing to be unconscious in a stranger's home for 8+ hours. So when we talk about trust and have positive experiences around it, that's how we think about trust in the sharing economy. So whether it relates to Feastly or other platforms, at a Feastly meal, you're never by yourself. There's a chef and there's a group of people. We take similar methods that you both do in terms of vetting chefs and going through a process and having social groups with the infinite number of Twitters and Facebooks and LinkedIn. And I would encourage all of you, if you pick up Wired or if you go look today, there's a cover story that's talking about how Airbnb and Lyft and Uber and Feastly are also mentioned, are helping Americans trust again. It's a cover story. I'd recommend you take a look at it, and it's one of many that have been talking about how the platforms exist and people are using them, so it's no longer such a phenomenon. Maybe it's more of a phenomenon that people aren't using them and they're less familiar with them. But sort of saying all that as a starting point, for all of us, that trust and safety is the core of everything that we do. When you think about the Feastly experience from logging on the website to walking through the door, there's an element of adventure around that many of our feasters like. You don't necessarily know who's going to be there, but you want to know that it's going to be safe and secure. So we do everything in our power to ensure that that happens again. Social groups, vetting the chefs. We have community managers who we think probably have the best job in the world. They basically go to a city and they eat people's food. That's what they do. They go, they meet the chefs, they eat the food, they make sure that the experience is okay. So yeah, I don't know, that's not.
Well, there's also insurance being provided for the hosts, the drivers, and the school has evolved quite a bit, so they keep
Right. Never in my life did I think I would have to learn so much about auto insurance than I do in my current job. But kind of along the same vein is that what Danny was talking about. Not only is our companies like ours being more efficient with the resources we have, but we're allowing consumers, I think, a direct platform to rate their services, right? After every ride that you take, whatever platform, UberX, Uber Black, you have to press either 1 or 5 stars of how your ride was. And that then goes towards that driver's personal star rating. And we monitor that. We have staff that look at that rating, and if it drops below a certain platform, we then will confront the driver, and if need be, we'll deactivate them off the platform. But I think just to show that there is that accountability there, that we're ensuring that people are having the safest, most reliable ride possible. On the topic of insurance, though, we argue that the drivers for UberX, they are maybe a GW grad student that is filling in some extra hours they have on the weekends. These aren't professional drivers. These aren't drivers that are making a living solely off of picking up people for rides. So we argue that these drivers don't need commercial insurance because outside of the trips they're doing for Uber, there's no commercial activity taking place. That being said, when they are on the Uber platform and they are transporting passengers around, we do back up their own personal auto insurance with excess liability insurance to ensure that they are protected in the case of an accident or what have you. But it's been a constant discussion I know that we've had with different states such as California, and it's re-emerging in different states as well. But we hope that the insurance industry can develop new, innovative plans that encompass kind of what we're doing with ride sharing. And I'm sure you can ask maybe there's some new products being made on the insurance front.
I know nothing about insurance, happily. I would say, 2 things. One, the power of peer-to-peer reviews is huge in this. It doesn't always work perfectly, you've seen that, but it works pretty darn well. Think about the last time you stayed in a hotel. Maybe you read reviews about the hotel. Did you read reviews about that specific room? Or the concierge at the hotel? Or another employee at the hotel that you interacted with? No. On Airbnb, I can read all of the past reviews of the previous guests who stayed in that room. I can also click on that guest and read their profile and read the reviews that their past hosts have left with them. That's a level of transparency that just hasn't existed before, and that's incredibly powerful. And we're seeing that work not just in the sharing economy, but everywhere with these internet platforms. But the second thing is thinking about trust, not in terms of safety necessarily, but in terms of brand. For the past several decades, huge international corporations have built brands that people have come to trust. McDonald's, when you go to McDonald's, you know exactly what you're going to expect. Marriott, when you stay at the Marriott, you know exactly what you're going to get. We're building very different kinds of brands. Right now, with Airbnb and with the sharing economy, the brand is, of course, our company, but really the brand is the individual provider. They have their own brand that they're building. When you go to a city and you can stay in any neighborhood on any block, you're looking for an experience and a brand that just fits you, that only that person and that home can provide. But then they also have their own trusted brand. They have all their reviews and ratings. And think about the implications of building brands at that kind of granular level and the kind of trust in your own personal brand you can create through the sharing economy.
I don't remember a hotel writing a review about my stay.
Hotel never reviewed you before, right? You now have reviews that on Airbnb that build your brand as a guest.
One quick thing, I think it's interesting to note, since we do have a lot of Uber users out here, one thing I always tell people, and they're shocked by this, the drivers actually have the opportunity to rate you as a rider as well. So you all have a star rating. And so that's in place to make sure that our partner drivers have a good opportunity. They do have that short amount of time before they accept a trip where they can see, maybe, I guarantee there's no one in this room, but if there's a person that only takes Uber on the weekends late at night, they're obnoxious. We don't want the driver to have to go through that opportunity, so they have that chance to decline as well. So like I said, it's just that level of accountability that we create between the drivers and the riders with that star rating system.
Well, thank you everyone. Now, your companies are experiencing incredible growth rates. And why is that? What is fueling it? And I know Mark already touched a little bit on the social factor, but is there anything else beyond that? Why not?
I'd just go back to the first thing I said. There's a huge demand for authentic, personal, customized travel experiences. We all know that. And there are not a lot of companies that are able to provide it at the scale that we've been able to provide it and to internationalize. I mean, Uber has grown exponentially, but you guys still have to go market by market. Airbnb was international from day one. People just signed up on the website. I mean, I guess it's just grown organically despite ourselves.
Economic factors, financial issues,
Well, yeah, I think it's probably not a coincidence that Airbnb was launched right at the beginning of the economic crisis. We're a platform that allows people to take their largest asset, their home, and make money from it at a time when, frankly, a lot of people were about to lose their homes and needed more money. I don't think that's a coincidence that there was a huge incentive for the providers to come to our marketplace and provide our supply. And as I said before, there's already this growing demand. I think a lot of sharing economy models probably have struggled to really gain traction because there isn't a strong incentive for the providers to bring supply to the marketplace. We're lucky that we do business in homes, so there's a huge incentive there.
To go on top of that, I think we're able to see as a technology company, we can quantify the data. We can track how many people are getting out at a certain airport in whatever city and opening up the app, only to see maybe that there are no cars on the road because we aren't operating there. So we can track that. It actually pops up as a little eyeball on this map. And we have a launch team then. If the demand is so high within that city, we go in there and we send our launch team in there, and we launch within a matter of weeks. We have people there onboarding drivers, and then we have cars on the road within a matter of weeks. So I think it's just being able to track that and know where really the demand is coming from, and being able to address that with having a low-cost ride-sharing alternative there for them at the push of a button.
So I don't know why now, but I'll speak to the supply and demand side. I think many of you probably know that chefs are incredibly passionate about what they do. So without Beastly, they'd be having you over for dinner, or you'd probably be having them over, or you'd be going to a dinner party. So now think about taking that and being able to expand your audience. So now maybe you really do want to have a pickle company, or you want to make some extra money, or you just love cooking, and you want to be able to be compensated for that just so you can continue to do it. So the people who've been cooking on Beastly are also just people who've been doing this anyway. They come and they say, so explain to me what the process is. How do I host a Beastly meal? So the answer is, have you ever had a dinner party? Yes, I do them all the time. Okay, great. Just do the same thing. You just may not know everybody who's going to be sitting around the table. Okay, that's fine. So on the demand side, there's this other way that we're living, which is how we engage socially. So, you can have 5,000 friends on Facebook and still be eating Campbell's soup out of a can on your couch in front of Hulu. So that notion of what it means to actually connect with people. So as we're looking at the different models, when we started, we were just offering food. So it's great, people came, they ate, but kept people coming back was the community. Their ability to have these authentic connections with individuals, and then, as I mentioned before, to find their sub-communities. They were now meeting with Italian speakers, or they were, single events. And just one other thing that I didn't mention before about safety and security is probably for the first 2 years that we were doing this in DC, our meals were about 65% women, and half of them were women, single women coming by themselves. Maybe they were single or maybe they were married, but it was a woman coming alone to a meal. So in a place like DC, which is incredibly transient, where you come and you want to meet other people, there are great platforms like Beastly out there that's similar to Meetup, allow you to meet with like-minded folks. You do it in a comfortable environment, and you're having this shared experience. You're part of the same adventure together. When you get to the table, there's a story about how you got there, and hopefully the story continues afterwards.
Great, thank you. Now, before we close, I want to leave some time for Q&A, but before we close, I want to ask you about your take on the future. So where do you see the travel industry going in the next 5 years? A wild guess, or any forward you want. Okay.
We always joke, just having gone through the regulatory process in different states, it's a very, as you can imagine, very sluggish process. So we always joke, 2015, like by that time, our team is saying that we'll be launching rocket ships into outer space and orbiting the moon. But really, I think the sky's the limit, and I really think as a company, our CEO has been very upfront about transporting people is the most difficult thing to do. But once you've mastered that, think of all the other opportunities there are to transport objects. And we just actually launched a courier service in New York. So it's just, I really think as a company, we're finding out how we can use our technology to expand into other markets and areas. But I think the travel industry as a whole, it's really the sky's the limit.
I don't pretend to know all that much about the travel industry. I just kind of know about Airbnb. But my prediction would be, with more people having expendable income around the world, actually getting from point A to point B becoming less expensive. That means more people are going to be traveling more frequently. So maybe you have kind of the typical tourism experience the first time you go to a place, but the second, third, fourth time you go there, you're going to want a really different, unique experience. And I think destinations are going to do really well if they figure out how to cater to people who want these different experiences that are not the same everywhere and that are different every time you come back. And that's probably going to mean less top-down tourism development, less sameness, and a lot more bottom-up tourism development, whether it's crowdsourced or some other way. But a form of tourism development that really taps into what is unique about that destination and about the services and products that people can consume when they visit there. And I don't know who's going to figure out how to provide that in addition to us, but I'm sure there are going to be a lot of new ideas that we've never thought of.
I would say in 5 years, in any place in the world that you travel, you would be able to take from the airport Uber or whatever your Uber affiliate would be in Micronesia, you haven't opened there yet, to stay at your Airbnb and then to go eat a Beastly talk about these things in the future, all of these things will be given. So you're well-traveled, you're tech-savvy, you're familiar with these things. So now let's go to Podunk, Iowa, where platforms like Airbnb may already be more familiar, but now you're going to have the older couple from Podunk, Iowa, who are now brand champions and ambassadors for Airbnb. Maybe they're telling their grandkids or their neighbors about it. So all this becomes a given. Same with Uber. I mean, the thought of standing outside and putting your hand up for a cab just seems a bit ridiculous. So that'll get more ridiculous over time, and maybe you will match up with Google self-driving cars, and your cars will be running 96% of the time, as they imagine. So the same thing with these, all of these things will just be realities in the future.
So you see a whole new world of shared travel.
I don't think it's a whole
Beginning to end.
I don't think so. As Maya mentioned before, these are the oldest things that we've done. We gave each other rides, we stayed in each other's homes, we cooked for each other. I mean, it's new because we're using technology to shift away from it. And then it's a new scale. And then the question will be how the majors in the marketplace, the hotel industry, the restaurant association, the taxi companies, how they start to respond. Either that they get on board, or they're pushed out of the way, or ideally they can come up with, we can coexist happily. It's a peaceful world where all of us are together sharing.
Well, thank you very much for your peeks into the future. I really like the shared space right idea.
We're working on it.
Now, I think we can open it to Q&A, and we can use one of the mics.
So
Any
many
questions?
hands already. This is great. Go to you first because you're closest.
Hey, I'm Simon. I work for Solomar International.
Hi.
I have a quick question. You were kind of actually touching on this right at the end there. Is you represent pretty major segments of the travel sector: transportation, accommodation, food and beverage. Where do you see the opportunities for the shared economy to fill in those gaps between those, or growing on those major segments of the travel sector moving forward? That may be a very hard question, but there's opportunities out there, obviously. Where do you see those opportunities moving in the future?
I get asked this a lot, and so we're already seeing like the provision of experiences like guides and stuff that already exists. I don't know how quickly that sector is growing, but I really do think there is going to probably be a challenge for other sectors to grow that quickly, again because of the problem of the incentive for people to provide the supply. There's certainly demand for a lot of these different kinds of experiences, but is there a strong enough incentive for people to provide the supply? Can they actually earn enough money from it? I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of the platforms where people can like rent their digital camera for an hour for $2 suffering, because why would I bother to rent my camera for $2? Some people do, but I don't know if that's going to grow to critical mass. And so I think the challenge is to figure out what are the sectors where the asset that someone has, either physical or intellectual, is something that they're actually incentivized to share with other people.
Yeah, to go off that, I understand there's a new tech startup in San Francisco that is looking to lease certain vehicles, and so it's called Breeze, I believe, and it's a startup, and what they're doing is that they have the fuel-efficient cars in their fleet, and then what they do is they rent out those cars to UberX partners, and then that is a way for, obviously, from Uber's point of view, that helps us with our supply, but it also allows people that maybe can't afford their own car. They're already using Uber-approved cars. We're not making sure this isn't like a Russa, El Camino, or whatnot, but. So it's addressing the supply issue for Uber, but also allowing people that maybe can't afford their own car a way to make some supplemental income. So
That's a good point. The ecosystem that supports all of our businesses, I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. Cleaning of people's homes, for example.
And I think the other part around it is reputation. So how is it, and there are a number of companies that are trying to figure this out, but how do you develop your sort of social FICO score? So if you are a power seller on eBay and you're also a great host on Airbnb, and you've been a model passenger on Uber. How is there a way to capture these things and basically give you a score that's relevant to other platforms that you would be using? So clearly there's a series of challenges around that, because if you're a company, you clearly don't want to give up data about your users, but this is going to be moving forward. So I'm a student of political science, and as I was thinking about this, the idea that most came to mind is this concept of binding. So at the end of the Second World War, the United States bound itself into these organizations, which allowed itself to have this permanent position, whether it was at the World Bank or the United Nations, basically recognizing that it was at the apex of power and it wanted to use that in some way moving forward. So I don't know if, at a moment, some of these organizations, when they sort of see themselves at their peak, will view it as some sort of benevolent way of saying, well, now is the opportunity for the eBay, Amazon, Airbnb to create some type of platform that allows us to be at the center of the creation of it, which has implications moving forward or not. But I see, to me, that's a huge opportunity in the marketplace, depending on how you're able to figure out these challenges.
One last thing I just thought of too, a project that I've been tasked with on the policy team for Uber is that we've seen there's a huge demand among the disabled community of getting around cities. I find it shocking that some larger cities, I believe it's Boston, had, we're talking 5 to 10 to 15 maybe cabs in the city of Boston that were wheelchair accessible. How can Uber as a technology company, how can we position ourselves to better service those in the disabled community, with providing them the same, safe, reliable service as we do for everyone else. So another market or just, community that we're trying to better service. We've gotten a lot of work from the disabled community. That's a great need in that ecosystem there. So.
Hi, my name is Juan Luna. I'm here at GW, the International Institute of Tourism Studies, and I'm curious as to how you're handling pricing, climate change, and standards.
Well, pricing, we don't handle it. It's up to the host. The market sets the price. You charge too much for your room, you're not going to get any bookings. You charge too little, you're going to get way too much and realize you can up your price. We help people make better decisions on their pricing by showing them comparable properties within their area. And they decide, oh no, I have way better art than that place, so I can charge more. Climate change. We just finished an environmental impact study, actually, that's not yet been released, but I'm sure you'll not be surprised to hear that Airbnb guests actually have far less environmental impact on a city than the typical tourist to a city does. And even though we may be inducing more travel, still the impact that person has on the destination is so much less than the typical visitor that the induced travel actually doesn't really make a difference. I think there are lots of things we can do to make sure that those impacts are even lesser, and we probably will. And the last one was standards. That's something we've started to work on. Again, we've relied for the past several years on peer reviews to help set standards and to incentivize people to be the best hosts. But we just hired Chip Conley of Joie de Vivre, who's our head of hospitality, who has drafted standards for hosts and is developing a training curriculum for hosts all over the world. We're working on guest standards as well. I think we can definitely supplement the peer review system by providing some guidance and tips and best practices.
I was wondering if I'd be able to make it through this presentation without the subject of surge pricing to come up, everyone's favorite subject. I don't know if I assume some of you are familiar with surge pricing. After New Year's, I believe it was Jessica Seinfeld that tweeted out her photo of her son's Uber ride on New Year's Eve that was hundreds of dollars or whatnot. But surge pricing is what Uber strives to do is every time you open up that app, we want to make sure that there is a car icon on that app, that you're able to get a ride, which might come at a premium, right? What we do is to incentivize drivers during times of high demand, we need to find a way to incentivize our drivers to get on the road to meet that demand. So there on weekends, maybe Friday or Saturday night, there will be a surge price in effect. Right when you open the app, there'll be a huge screen that pops up with 2.0, maybe even 3.0. But we have a lot of safeguards in place to make sure that consumers know what they're going to be paying for at the end of that ride. They have to actually type in 3.0, that's the multiplier. So, I mean, even if you are at the end of the night, you can't blame the 3 cocktails you had at dinner on the fact that you paid a little bit more than you thought you should for that ride. One last thing, dynamic pricing is something that's been in effect for many years now. I mean, if you were to go and try to book a flight the day before, it's going to come at a cost. So we just argue that it's a way to make sure that we are always able to provide you with a reliable ride in a matter of minutes. But it might have to come at a cost, but it's giving you that choice of at least having that ride as an option. So, climate change. Thank you. Yeah, our UberX model, we try to bring on as many drivers that have fuel efficient cars, and we don't actually have any hard data that shows kind of how these fuel efficient cars are bettering the local communities, but I definitely see that being something that we try to work towards at finding how that is affecting the environment and all the cities we operate in. Standards, like Molly said, based on the star rating, if the driver does have an overall rating that drops below, it depends on the market, but it could be 4.7, 4.6, we will confront that driver and say, we, over time, if we've seen that your star rating is dipping below the standards we have in place, and we'll deactivate them from the system as well. Same goes for the rider. We want to, that level of accountability we want to have to make sure that both the rider and driver are having the best ride possible. 5-star ride is what we try to call it.
So very quickly, pricing, you can make Kraft macaroni and cheese, just don't give it a fancy French name and charge $150 for it. So similar to Molly's idea, truth in advertising, we have a review process as well. And in terms of climate change, the things that we care about, we haven't done any impact studies yet on the difference between cooking at home versus cooking at restaurants, but it's an interesting thing that we should look into in terms of oil and energy usage in one versus the other. And then standards, I mentioned them before, but we have PC guidelines for our chefs, and then we have add-ons that they can do if they wanted to opt into insurance or other pieces. But it's very important to us, obviously, to make sure that there's a positive experience and it's standardized around some routine.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for talking. I think everything's been really interesting and helpful. I'm Talia with Brand USA. I have some questions about how you manage to kind of market your various platforms, given that all the experiences are very different, and how you plan to reach those travelers kind of in their various planning cycles, so earlier on with accommodations and while they're on the ground, with different types of transportation and meal options.
So we have staff in every office that we operate in across the world. We have staff called community managers that are getting out there and basically making sure that, addressing maybe if the driver took a turn and the trip ended up being a couple dollars more than what you liked, you can then reach out to them and get that dollar or so taken off your trip. But so we have the community managers. We actually have brand ambassadors, we call them, and I know that they're from GW. We have many from GW. They come to our office space and we talk to them and see how we can help get the word out on campus. But just the fact that we have everyone that logs onto the app, we have their email, so we're constantly, hopefully not too often, but we're sending them email messages, giving them a heads up on a sort of promotional weekend that we have coming up. But so I think that's mainly how we would reach out to people.
I'm going to actually steal a phrase from your CEO for a second. So when Brian Chesky of Airbnb was at South by Southwest, and somebody was asking a question about marketing growth, and he said, and he says this all the time, but you know, any day of the week I would rather have 100 missionaries than 10,000 mercenaries per brand. And I think that's a really powerful message, especially when it relates to, for the three of us here, you're having a tactile, authentic experience with an individual. You know, whenever I'm in Uber, I always talk to the taxi drivers. Whenever I'm at Airbnb, I always talk to the host. Whenever I go to feasting meals, I always have a relationship with the chef. So obviously there's something that's incredibly powerful there, and that as a user, you go and then our feasters become the best brand ambassadors for us. So yes, we've had press and marketing and community managers and all those things, but if you ask us what makes us most effective and most successful, it's the fact that our chefs are having meals, and then even when the meals are sold out, they're opening up more seats and letting people sit in various rooms because they just want more people there, or people who are around the table, they're then sharing the experiences, not just in photos, but they're telling all their friends around them about it. So these are powerful emotional experiences that, you know, yeah, there's a system around it. We have marketing teams, community managers, but this is the success of any fund. The product sells itself.
In other words, word of mouth. We're all pretty young companies. We don't even have a CMO yet. Our marketing team is pretty young. I don't even think we've figured out, you know, at what point people are deciding when to stay on Airbnb in their planning process. It is really, we have grown organically through word of mouth. Maybe someday we'll end up having to segment things up that way, but not yet.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think our time is up, and thank you for your
I also want to say thank you to our speakers, Molly, Danny, and Dave, for joining us tonight and giving us an insider's look into the sharing economy. We really do appreciate all of your insights, and I personally, I think you probably share my thoughts that we're really excited to see what happens next with each of your companies and with the other do have a reception. It's upstairs.